in his footsteps.
We're continuing our walk in Jesus' footsteps through the Gospel of Luke. We've covered a lot of ground, and we're still only in the first chapter. We've read why Luke wrote this gospel. We've read how Zechariah learned that he will be a father and why. And we've listened in on the conversation between Mary and the angel Gabriel. And we witnessed a beautiful moment between Mary and Elizabeth, two women who testified to God's miraculous power.
Now, Luke brings us back to the story of Zechariah, Elizabeth, and John. Our passage today is Luke 1, 57 to 66, where he tells us the story of John's birth. Before we dive in, let's have our son, Christopher, read this week's memory verse.
He motioned for a writing tablet, and to everyone's surprise, he wrote, "His name is John." Instantly, Zechariah could speak again, and he began praising God.
The last time we saw Zechariah, he doubted God's power to do the impossible. As a result, he was made mute and possible deaf until his son was named. In today's reading, we get a very different picture of Zechariah.
We definitely do. It seems Zechariah learned a lot during his months of silence. And in this story, he had the chance to show what he learned. But before we go much further, let's first summarize the story. John was born, and Elizabeth's neighbors and relatives were very happy for her. 8 days later, they came to witness the baby's circumcision and hear the name of the baby. Of course, they all had an opinion about the name.
To everyone's shock, Elizabeth said that the baby's name is John. They pressure her to change the name to Zechariah in honor of the baby's father. Then they disregarded Elizabeth's wishes and appealed to Zechariah. They expected he would agree with them. Luke says they signed their question to him, which could mean they used sign language to convey their question. This is why some scholars believe Zechariah may have been deaf as well mute.
Here was Zechariah's moment. Unable to speak, he wrote down his decision. What name did he write? Did he go along with social expectations and tradition, or did he stay true to God's will?
He wrote, "His name is John." The act of obedience loosened his tongue and he could speak again. And his first words were, "Praise to God."
These extraordinary events caught everyone's attention. They began to wonder who John would become. First century people had no trouble overcoming the lack of internet, radio, or TV. They still managed to spread the story of John's birth far and wide so that many people were talking about it. It became a sort of watch this space story.
Oh yes, everyone was primed and ready to see what John would become. When he began his mission, you can bet people remember the story of his birth.
It is an incredible story. It was very personal to Zechariah and Elizabeth, as all birth stories are to the parents. It was also significant to the people of the day because of the miraculous events connected to the birth. And there is something in it for us today as well.
Definitely. Zechariah and Elizabeth faced a choice. Do they stay true to God's will? Or do they give way to the expectation of others? We are often faced with a similar choice: to obey God or give in to the pressure to go against His will. That pressure can come from others, our circumstances, or from within ourselves. Which do we choose to follow?
In the case of Zechariah and Elizabeth, it was reasonable for neighbors and relatives to expect the baby to be named Zechariah. After all, it was their culture and custom to do so. But in this case, God had given specific instructions about the baby's name. Elizabeth and Zechariah chose to stay true to God's will, even in the face of communal pressure. They show their loyalty to God by obeying His instructions.
They model an aspect of God's kingdom mindset.
That's right. A mindset is something internal. The only way to see is through someone's actions.
And their actions reveal an attitude of surrender. That is a key aspect of the kingdom mindset. Those with a kingdom mindset are willing to surrender to God's will. They trust God's plans are best, even when they don't understand them. They show their surrender by obeying God's commands, by remaining faithful to Him.
And there's a wonderful outcome to the kingdom mindset, especially to practicing surrender. When we surrender to God's will and His ways, we profoundly experience His presence. As long as we hold on to our own way and our own will, there isn't room for God in our lives.
But when we choose to align our will with God's, we can grow closer to Him. We can know Him better and trust Him more. And in turn, He can do amazing things in us and through us.
The Apostle Peter wrote about surrender and how he brings us closer to God. He said, "So humble yourselves under the mighty power of God, and at the right time, He will lift you up in honor. Give all your worries and cares to God, for He cares about you."
In other words, surrender to God's sovereign power. Trust in His timing and plans, and trust His heart toward you. When we do that, we can feel and experience His care for us.
The key is to surrender to Him.